Game week is here. West Virginia kicks off their season this Thursday, and we could not be more excited about it. We will talk all about that on the Blue Gold Sports podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm Wesley Shoemaker, host of the Blue Gold Sports podcast, back today with Aaron Parker. Aaron, it is a happy Monday. We are 3 days away from college football, 3 days away from the return of the backyard brawl, 3 days away from West Virginia kicking off their 2022 season, 3 days away from arguably the biggest season in Mountaineer football since that 2018 year under Will Grier and Dana Holgorsen. A lot to talk about today. Obviously, talking about Neil Brown announcing the starter at quarterback for the Mountaineers and JT Daniels today. Talking a little bit about the Brawl in general, who we think will perform the best for West Virginia Thursday night. A little bit about uniforms and kind of what this season means to Neil Brown and company. And at the end, we're going to give predictions. And then I have an interview with Pitt reporter Dalton Coppola, giving you information on all things Pitt. So let's get into it right away. Aaron, how we doing? Happy Monday. Big time. College football is back. Happy New Year. I'm excited. How excited are you?
I'm pumped. It feels so good to be back. It's game week. Felt like that day would never come. It feels like it's been so long since that dumb guaranteed rate bowl. It feels like it's been so long since football season. So I'm ready to get a new season underway.
Yeah, I think that for Mountaineer fans everywhere, there should be some excitement building. I think this offense is going to be a lot improved from last year. Obviously, let's just get into it right away. Big upgrade at quarterback. It became official today. Head coach Neil Brown announcing two-time transfer quarterback JT Daniels as the starter. Daniels obviously started at USC, got hurt in his first game, went to Georgia, 7-0 at Georgia as a starter, got hurt last year. Georgia wins the national championship under Stetson Bennett, and now Daniels ends up in Morgantown. To me, there was really no surprise here. I think when you bring in a guy with the caliber and with the skill set that JT has, he's going to be the starter. I think it was more of a formality for him to earn it because nothing should be guaranteed, especially in sports, especially when you're new to a group. So good on him for earning that spot. Kind of my reaction to this was not surprised, just kind of surprised it took this long. I get there's that gamesmanship, but I think everyone in the Pitt building knew who was going to be running out there under center for the Mountaineers. So kind of good that we now can officially set the storyline of Kadon Slovis and Graham Harrell and JT Daniels all in the same game. Should be exciting, should be electric.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you said. I think, it's just more of a formality more than anything to not name JT the starter weeks ago. I think Neil likes his quarterbacks, Garrett Green, Nico Marchiol, and Will Crowder. I think he wants them to stay within the program. I don't think he wants to see any of them leave. So to go and name a starter right away, I think maybe that's one of the reasons Neil did that. But JT is a great competitor. He's a proven good quarterback, and I like the things that the people had to say about him in the press conference today. Neil mentioned that he's not rattled easily. That's good to hear, considering W's quarterback play has been a little shaky over the last 3 or 4 years. Well, since Will Grier graduated. But other people had good things to say too. Graham Harrell said JT's got a stoic kind of intellectual personality. That's good to hear. And Bryce Ford Wheaton really came in and complimented him and, said it was the most catchable deep ball he's ever seen. So, that gives me some excitement. And I think the receivers are going to feed off that.
Yeah, I just looking at his stats from last year, obviously Daniels was 7-0 as a starter, as mentioned, 722 yards, 7 touchdowns, 68 of 94 passing. And I think one thing that stood out to me, which I hadn't really thought of until I heard it today, was Daniels has practiced against a Georgia defense that has been one of the best defenses in the country the past few years. So that can't do anything but help JT. I think this, as we kind of talk about Pitt real quick, Pitt's defensive line is legit. Like, they probably have a top 5 defensive line in the country. They're going to get after you. They're going to cause chaos. They're going to try and make things and make life as uncomfortable as possible for Daniels and company. I think that's where the battle will be won or lost for West Virginia if you're going to win this game. I think that defensive line, offensive line showdown is going to be big. Obviously, West Virginia, the communication should not be a problem. Returning all starters from last year, returning guys that like a Zach Frazier, like a Wyatt Milam, who are really talented. It's just a matter of getting it done when the lights are brightest. So I think as for JT handling that pressure, he can kind of move outside the pocket a little bit. He knows when he's got to throw it away, and I think that clock will be ticking. That kind of you got to get the ball out of your hands clock, and it's good. It's going to be fun to see that battle up front. Yes, Pitt's going to win a couple times, but hopefully Frazier and company up front and Daniels calling plays from behind him should be a good matchup to watch.
Yeah, it should be. And on paper, it's very exciting. Obviously, Pitt's very experienced on the defensive line. I think Jordan Wesley, the defensive coordinator of WVU, came in and said, they try to make you one-dimensional. They try to take away that run game right away and make you, beat them with your deep ball, your consistent passing. Obviously, WVU hasn't had that over the last couple of years, but you got a new play caller and Graham Harrell. You got JT Daniels. But I'm a little concerned about the run game. I'm not overly concerned about the offensive line because they're very experienced with WVU's group. Zach Frazier, Doug Nestor, Wyatt Milam in his second year. All these guys are very talented, former 4 stars, former, good high school football players, high school wrestlers. They've been there, done that. But I do think they'll lose some battles, and I'm kind of worried about the run game with Letty Brown gone now. So there's not going to be a ton of holes, and I'm wondering if Tony Mathis, Justin Johnson, Jalen Anderson, and those guys can hit those few holes they get.
Yeah, let's kind of talk about that running back room. Something that kind of caught my eye today. West Virginia released their depth chart for week 1. Neil said last week they're going to go in a trio of running backs with Tony Mathis, Justin Johnson, and CJ Donaldson. You look at this depth chart, CJ Donaldson's name was not listed. Neil was asked about that, and he said he's going to play this year. He's going to be a difference maker. But from the looks of things, it looks like behind the scenes something happened where Donaldson will not be playing week 1. Obviously, that could just be some kind of smoke. But to me, the looks of it is Donaldson will not be playing or suiting up week 1. The significance of that, I think, is unknown. Donaldson's kind of a big guy, went from tight end to running back, more of a bruiser. And when you're going against a D-line like Pitt, I think that's important, especially when you get down into the red zone, get down inside the 10, and you need one of those guys that can get you 3 yards, or it's 3rd down and 2. Need a guy that can get you those yards. He's a bruiser that can run through those guys. Not saying Tony Mathis or Justin Johnson can't, but the body type of CJ Donaldson just fits that mold more. And so him not being on that depth chart is a little concerning for me. Another thing, kind of staying on the offense, Michael Laughlin, tight end, should be good to go. Coach Brown said, looks like him and Colorado State transfer Brian Palende, they will both be playing. And I think there will be a 3rd tight end, Neil said, but they are not listed on the depth chart. As for up front on the offensive line, 7 guys will be good to go. The only question mark as far as starting is Brandon Yates or Jaquay Hubbard at right tackle. Other than that, things are pretty solid up front. You got Wyatt Milam left tackle, James Committer left guard, Zach Frazier center, Doug Nestor right guard. Pretty much the same from last year. And then kind of looking at the rest of your offense, this receiver group I think is highly underrated. Bryce Ford Wheaton, really good. Then you got Caden Prather, who's young but talented. Sam James, a veteran who's been there, done that. Then you got a guy like Reese Smith who can kind of do the little things right, catch those slants for 5-8 yards here and there, big on 3rd down, kind of have those reliable receivers. Like if you want to give an NFL comp to him, probably like a Julian Edelman, someone who isn't going to beat you over the top, but is kind of reliable underneath. So I think this receiver group can be surprising, and especially against the Pitt secondary, which isn't the most talented, and out of their whole defense, probably the most inexperienced. And the biggest question mark for them, I would say that this receiver group has the chance to make some plays Thursday night.
I agree with that. And, I do think they're an underrated part of this Mountaineer team. People aren't really talking about them. They haven't made a ton of noise, but, I really like Bryce Ford Wheaton as a leader. People forget Sam James has been here since the Will Greer and Gary Jennings and David Sills days. he's a leader as well. I really like the talent of Kane Prather, and I think Reese Smith is going to have a bigger year, like you said. He's durable, and he's reliable on the third down slants. I don't think he got the ball enough last year. That's kind of my opinion. I think you bring up a good point about CJ Johnson. I mean, they've been talking so much about him, but yeah, he's not on that depth chart. But part of me thinks that he might get a carry or two. It's speculation, but just because he's on that depth chart, I mean, I know Neil today said, as far as red shirts go, he said there's a couple freshmen O linemen that they're going to redshirt, but outside of that, they're going to give everybody an opportunity. They don't have any plans to redshirt anybody right now outside of like freshman O line and D linemen. So I think if his efforts are needed, I think he'll get a carry or two because they've been talking a lot about him. He's big, he's powerful, and he's got some speed. But also Jalen Anderson is left off that list too. But I've heard good things about him too. So if their efforts are needed, I wouldn't count them out.
I just don't know where they draw the line of who's traveling, who's not, who's going to then make an impact. Because in a game like this, every possession matters, every kind of play matters, and so Neil's not going to run out a guy that he doesn't fully trust. And if there's stuff going on behind the scenes, behind closed doors that we just don't know about, that could impact how much trust they have in a guy, Neil's not going to go out there and with people he doesn't trust. And I think he's proven that. He's told us that. And I expect that to kind of be the case. Kind of just talking about positions in total, if you guys want numbers breakdowns. Wide receiver, they said they're going to go with about 5 to 6 guys, 3 running backs that are going to play. Obviously, as we just said, there could be a question mark around that, though. 3 tight ends, as we talked about up front. On the defensive line, Neil said they expect to play 8 to 10 guys. Linebackers, they'll play 4. Spear, they got 2. And then 3 or 4 corners and 3 or 4 safeties. One thing I did find out that was kind of a general theme from this team is that they're going to play a lot of bodies. Obviously, first game, conditioning probably isn't fully where it's going to be. It's going to be warmer than, say, if you were playing in October. Won't be as warm as it was, say, today, where it was almost reached 90 degrees here in Morgantown. But it's going to be warm. It's going to be a warm evening, and it like playing 70 plays can wear on guys, especially on defense, especially when you haven't played a football game in 9 months. So expect a lot of bodies to be played. Expect guys to be going in and out a lot.
Yeah, agreed with that. And you would hope the conditions aren't bad as far as heat. It's 90 degrees here today in Morgantown, so you hope it's not too hot. And obviously, it's not AstroTurf on that stadium, at whatever you want to call it now, Acrisure Stadium. So hopefully it doesn't get up to be like 100 degrees on the field. So hopefully they can just go out and play their game and not worry about any of the other things like that. But yeah, like you said, we'll be interested to see who dresses and who kind of has to stay back out of that group. But Neil wants to give everybody a chance, but I want to see how far that can extend to.
Yeah, for me, the biggest things are, where do you kind of place your importance? Like, for example, let's say it's West Virginia scores late in the first half with 4-5 minutes to go, and your defense has been on the field for a good amount in the first half. Are you going to play every number one for the last 4 minutes of that first half? Or are you going to try and rotate in guys when, say, you can get a stop and go into the halftime with some serious momentum? Like those kind of game management situations with his roster, I just don't know what is going to happen. And I think it's more of a feel in game with his players, kind of seeing how they feel more than anything that he can predict. And so that'll be kind of something to keep track of, though, and keep watch of, is who's in, who's out, who's in for a lot of plays and who's not. Because if it's a close game down the wire, which I think we both fully expect it to be, you've got to be able to have your best guys in if you're going to want a chance to beat a top 20 team in the country. And I just hope they have that ability to be in the game late.
Absolutely. And these little strategical things we're talking about, rotating guys in and out, and not exactly saving them, but waiting for the right moments, stuff that you and me can't really figure out what the right decision is. But this is Neil's 4th year, and these little strategic things right here, he's got to get them right. This is a team where there's a little room for error. Obviously, we saw the Mountaineers go into Maryland last year to start the season, and they lost. They're probably for more reasons than just strategy, maybe just bad quarterback play, and getting burnt on defense every time. But this is a good Pitt team. They're ranked nationally, and they're a very good team. So there's little room for coaching error in this game. That's my opinion.
I think though one thing that will help Neil is that he's no longer going to be calling plays. He talked about that today, how Graham Harrell's going to be calling all offensive plays. That's a switch, obviously, with Neil kind of co-calling plays last year with former offensive coordinator Jared Parker. And I think that is going to help him manage the game more as a head coach. He said he's going to be a resource for Coach Harrell, but not going to be the one that's going to be making final decisions. He's going to let his guy that he brought in kind of do his job. And I think that's going to help him from a game strategy standpoint of he's going to be able to see everything, think more about everything because he's not going to have to stay in on every single play to play basis. And as far as time management, roster management in a drive to drive short term scenario goes, I think that will really help.
I think so too. Obviously, some people have raised questions on Neil's play calling, but I'm not getting on to him or anything. But I just thought he needed an offensive coordinator, and that was before Coach Harrell was brought in here to WVU. And when I found out Coach Harrell was coming here, I thought that was a big get. He's got the resume as a player. He was under Coach Leach there at Texas Tech. He won a lot of ball games, and his track record it proves himself to be a good coach. I mean, he was Mason Fine's coach at North Texas. He put up a lot of numbers. He was successful at USC. And I think he's a good coach, and I think he's also mentioned that he's more of a quote unquote air raid guy. But the numbers prove that when he's at a university, their running game isn't bad either. So him calling plays up in the booth, and seeing it from that high level, I think that's going to be good for the Mountaineers this year. It'll be a good change of pace as opposed to Neil and Jared Parker calling plays.
Yeah, kind of bouncing off your point there and about running the ball and having that as your identity. That's what Pitt's going to want to do. Pitt has new offensive coordinator, Coach Signetti, and he's kind of more of a bruiser. Let's slow the game down, run the ball. And I think that's a problem for if you're West Virginia. And if you're looking at last year, look how West Virginia lost a lot of their games. Oklahoma State, what did they do? They kind of grinded it out and wore you down. Minnesota in the bowl game did the exact same thing. So you're going to have to stop the run if you want to win this game. And Dante Stills, he talked about that today, how he can't wait to get out there and try and prove their defense is better than last year. He said that last year they knew if they stop the run, they win more games. And he knows that. They know that. This team knows that. So I think that's a kind of a big thing going into this week. Kind of talking a little bit more about Pitt. Obviously, we talked about their offense with Slovis, their defensive line, but their offensive line is also really good too. They're very experienced, very old in a sense, not even just by age, just by experience and college football starting experience. So that's something that could help the Panthers. West Virginia, we don't really know what the loss of Akeem Messidor is going to be like yet. I think they have enough to fill in, and I think if you're West Virginia, you obviously hope that, but we really don't know how much that loss is going to affect the guys like Dante, like Taj Alston up front until we kind of get into game action against a good offensive line. So those are two big battles for me, offensive versus defensive line, both for both teams, when West Virginia's on offense and when Pitt's on offense.
I think you're right. We I've kind of tried to move on from the whole Akeem Messidor thing, but you bring up a good point bringing him back up because, I think Taj Austin and Dante and those guys really like playing with him last year and the year before. He proved in his 2 years that he's a good player. So now that he's gone, I still trust the defensive line. I think they're old in a sense with, Taj Austin's been in school for 5 or 6 years. Dante's been here for a while now, 4 years plus. Jordan Jefferson's in his third year here. They're good. They're big. I think they're fast enough. I think we'll have to see that. Their speed against the offensive line, offensive guards, and tackles. But yeah, I think the battle is going to be won up front. I mean, you hear that all the time that the game's won at the line of scrimmage, and you make a good point about Pitt's offensive line. They were a good team last year, a good offense, good running offense, and a lot of those guys are returning. So to see them go up against WVU's line and WVU's kind of rushers, bandit positions like Winnell Carr and Jared Bartlett, it'll be interesting to see. And, WVU's got to win those battles.
Yeah, pivoting now kind of to the game as a whole. Neil Brown was on Sports Center, ESPN's one of ESPN's shows on Saturday, and he kind of talked about this game and what it means to the people of the state of West Virginia, people of Western Pennsylvania, and this game is exactly what he said. It's kind of your coal miners versus steel mill workers. It's for the people of West Virginia. It's for the people of Western Pennsylvania, and this game is a game that should be played every year. Obviously, West Virginia is in the Big 12, and you don't get that regional rivalry. I think that you can have rivalries with teams that are in Texas, but it's not the same as driving an hour and 20 minutes up the road and you're there playing an away game and your fan base is going to travel and there's a 68,000 person stadium and your fans could easily take up 25, 30,000 of those seats. So for me, kind of this rivalry has so much history, so much, there's so much to it. And I think it's so good for the game that it's being played. It's even better for the game of football that it's being played on a standalone Thursday night. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but there's a lot that you can find from this history. There's been obviously no real recency with this. Obviously, I think you and I were 9, 10 years old the last time this game was played, but there you still hear the stories. You still obviously, if you're Pitt, you have that one game that no one up here speaks of. If you're West Virginia, you've won a lot of games recently. You kind of own the series recently. So there's give and take for both teams, certainly.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point where with all the stories, I mean, in the press conference today, multiple guys were talking about stories. I mean, Bryce Ford Wheaton is a third generation, Mountaineer player to play against Pitt. They were talking about his grandfather tearing up Pitt, getting 300 all-purpose yards, and how he dug up those archives. And Dante Stills' his dad, Gary, on those strong 90s WVU defensive teams. Gary still talks about playing Pitt to Dante and how big of a game it is. So, it's a big game. There's a lot of hatred, a lot of highs and lows for both teams, upsets and, bitter defeats, but I think you're right. I mean, WVU 7-3 in the last 10. I mean, they've kind of put not a stranglehold on the series, but, in the last couple of days of the Big East Conference, I think they, took the momentum into the series before it kind of dropped off for a while. Obviously, Pitt's got the all-time record, but the last meeting was a big one. I mean, I was 10 years old and I was at that game. To this day, that was the best WVU game I've ever been to. Mountaineers won by 1 point, down 14-0, came back. Stedman Bailey, big 65-yard touchdown, stiff-armed a guy in the face. If they don't win that game, they don't go to the Orange Bowl. So, this game always has big implications, as you know.
Yeah, let's set the stage a little bit here. Just kind of talking about Thursday. You got a Pitt team that's coming off an ACC championship. You've got a West Virginia team that's desperate to prove these last 3 years aren't who they are going forward. You've got a Pitt team that's got a quarterback that played under your offensive coordinator if you're West Virginia and was teammates with your current quarterback. You've got a game that's going to be on national television with College Game Day there. The whole eyes are going to be on this game. The only other game of the night that's a Power 5 game is Penn State Purdue. But even then, you're going to be on national television in prime time. And it's a rivalry that you got two schools that hate each other. You've got two schools that don't want anything to do with each other. You've got two schools that all they want to do is beat each other. You've got Pitt team, which many believe in their program that their ceiling is the college football playoff. And you've got a West Virginia team that believes with the new quarterback, with the returning defense, and with pieces on the offensive side that are weapons, they could possibly reach a Big 12 championship game. So the drama's there, the setting's there, and I think both teams are excited to get this thing going.
Yeah, you set the stage real well there. Bringing up the Power 5 games, Penn State, Purdue. I mean, Purdue's terrible. I think WVU Pitt is the marquee matchup. It kind of just takes me back to, obviously we were really young, but like in the Rich Rodriguez days, they would get a lot of Thursday night games. But back then it was kind of like that was the one game. It wasn't, a handful of Thursday night games. That was the one marquee game on ESPN. Kind of takes me back to like researching the 2006 game at Heinz Field. Pitt brought, I think they sold out the stadium. Pat White, Steve Slayton ran all over them. Pat White accounted for like 4 touchdowns. Steve Slayton accounted for 4 touchdowns. There's a lot of history in this game, and to play it on a Thursday night kind of just brings me back to those old Big East days. I know it's different now, but the stage is set, and I think the eyes of the nation are kind of upon them, especially with College Game Day in town.
Yeah, and another thing to kind of that I think adds to this and adds to how special this game is you just look at what West Virginia is playing for. You can just look at what they're wearing. New uniforms, the Country Roads uniforms. They were released on the state of West Virginia's birthday this summer, and it's what West Virginia is. It kind of represents that Country Roads Take Me Home vibe of you've got the state map all over the place. You've kind of got the traditional state logo, and I think that's a really clean look. I think one thing that they've kind of gone away with is that state logo, and they're I think slowly starting to bring it back a little bit. I love the state outline with the WV in the middle. I think that's such a clean look on the helmets. There's just so much to like about this uniform, and I think that kind of, in a sense, adds to the drama of you've got these uniforms that represent your state as you're going to go play your biggest rival, and it's cool to see that they're doing more for these types of games.
Yeah, I'm a big uniform guy, so I might nerd out a little bit here, but I completely agree with you. I mean, the Country Roads uniforms are really nice. I agree with what you said on the state of West Virginia outline. I remember when the Mountaineers brought that out as a throwback helmet, like in 2013, and they've used it just very sporadically ever since. I think they need to use a lot more. I think they need to make a full out throwback uniform with it, but that's besides the point. I think the designers did a really good job with putting the I-79 and all the country roads within the numbers. I thought that was very interesting. You can only assume Pitt is going to wear their kind of like what you call it city jerseys. They have those gray steel uniforms that represent their city and their
Have they announced what they're wearing yet? I'm not
not,
sure.
to my knowledge, they have not announced that, but I would put $5 on the fact that they wear those steel gray uniforms, especially because that would go against the white uniforms of WVU. But I think WVU's uniforms are very nice. Not in my opinion, they're just a step below the Cole uniforms, the pro combat uniforms of the 2010 Pitt WVU game. I thought that one really embodied the blue collar, the coal mine aspect of West Virginia. But these are a close second, and I think they're going to look really good on field.
Yeah, I just think I think that helmet with the state outline and the flying W, it's such a clean look. I think it kind of like when these games mean more, you do more for them. And I think that's what another reason why you're not breaking these uniforms out to go travel to Austin, Texas and play in a Texas, like you're not doing that. You're doing this because it's a regional rivalry, because it's a big game. And I think that's one of those things. This is why you play the rivalry. You play the rivalry because cool things come with it. One of those cool things is a uniform. Moving forward, let's talk big picture. We've kind of floated it and touched on this topic the past month, past 2 months throughout the summer. It's now go time for Neil Brown. I wouldn't say his seat is hot. I would say the oven is being turned on and it can heat up or it can be turned off. I would say that within the first month, by October 2nd, we're going to have a really good idea of the future of this program. And we're going to have a really good idea of Neil Brown's future with West Virginia. I don't think unless this team completely falls out and they win 3 games this year, that Neil Brown's job is in jeopardy, just because it is hard to build and he has gone through a pandemic. He just had his first recruiting class. The 2023 recruiting class is highly ranked. So I don't think that he's in trouble losing his job, but I will say that if he cannot perform and if he cannot split these rivalry games in this month, if he cannot probably go to the month of October in that Texas game, if he has more than one loss heading into that Texas game on October 1st, this team's in trouble. So I think that this season is huge for him. The season's huge for the trajectory of this program. And The pressure is on. The pressure is on. I don't think it's all the way turned up, but if you want to talk about I'm turning on the stove and it's on low, but I can turn it up if I need to get cooking, then I will. But I'd say for right now, the stove is on low.
Yeah, I'll put it pretty simply in my opinion. I think he would be on the hot seat if it weren't for the fact that the buyout is so much money. It's a ton of money. And it was even more last year. But you're right. I mean, he went through a pandemic season. When he came in 2019, man, Dana Holgerson kind of cleared the place out. There was nothing left. That 2019 was really bad. I mean, there was not a ton of talent on that team. So this is his first real recruiting class. But it's go time, like you said. It's 2022. It's his fourth year. He stuck with Davey for 2 straight years. He didn't win the job at Western Kentucky, and questions have been raised. And so, like, now he's got Graham Harrell, now he's got JT Daniels, he's got a proven offensive line, defensive line, receiving core. This is the year you got to do it. And like you said, I mean, if he's not splitting those rivalry games, if he's heading to Austin with 2 or 3 losses, it's time to turn it up. But I think he's made a lot of moves in the last offseason or two to kind of put himself in a better position for this year. So I have faith in him, but that's just my opinion.
I think that also this whole saga of we're entering year 4 of the trust the climb era of the Neil Brown era at West Virginia kind of just even builds more into this game. You've like if they win this game, if they go on the road, beat a top 20 team in his biggest game yet as the head coach of the Mountaineers on the road, like if he does that Thursday night, we come on this podcast Friday and we say, dang, Neil Brown is the guy going forward. If they go out to Pitt Thursday night at Acrisure Stadium and they lose by 2 scores, 3 scores, question marks start getting raised of, oh, maybe JT's not the guy, or oh, dang, Neil, you lost a lot of talent in the transfer portal. Maybe that's then the question marks start popping up and you start overthinking and you're critically thinking everything. But if he goes out and this team wins on Thursday night, I think all the question marks go away. And as crazy as it sounds that this game is like kind of like he could save his job, even though his job, in my opinion, isn't that much in jeopardy. But like, I think you kind of buy yourself more time if you win a game like this. Like, let's look at Nebraska, for example. Nebraska just went to Ireland against Northwestern. They lost a game because they decided to onside kick a ball. Their receivers, like, they just
Up
made
11 points.
yeah, they just didn't make smart decisions to win the game. And if you're Neil Brown, you can't let that happen. I think it was a funny line he kind of said when he was talking about how he's going to start being more of a game manager, doesn't have to call plays. I would assume he was watching that Nebraska Northwestern game, and that's the game he mentioned when he said, "Yeah, I was watching the game this weekend." Won't name the name of the game, but I'll say that it was kind of a questionable things that decision making that I was like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that here." So hopefully that type of thing does not happen Thursday night, but you can kind of, in my opinion, make the future of Neil Brown at West Virginia if he wins this game. If he loses this game, it's not the end of the world, obviously, but like you've got to win these openers. Like if we think back to the openers where West Virginia has played a big time opponent, Virginia Tech in 17, they lose at FedEx. Maryland last year, they lost. I mean, NC State in 2019, and I think that's what they opened Neil Brown with at home at in 2019. Like they won that game, and that's NC State. It's not the NC State of this year, which is a top 10, top 15 team. It was the NC State of 3 years ago who really wasn't that good. So you're looking for a marquee win. You're looking for that win to start your year. You're kind of looking to jumpstart your program. And there's no better way to do that than Pitt this Thursday.
Yeah, I think you're completely right there. And Pitt's a good team. So I kind of agree with you in the fact that if WVU loses, it's not, immediately, fire Neil or whatever, but Pitt's a good team. And if you go out there and you play your best game for week 1, we'll just say, they're saying you got to iron out, of course. Say you go there and you lose by 3 or 6 or 7. I think, and maybe Pitt's just a more talented team or just a better team that day. I think you can kind of shake your head and be like, okay, but if you go out there and lose by 17 or 20 or something like that, that's not a good look. And, I think we're entering a year where, Neil Brown, I said it earlier, he's got to clean up some of the, just the kind of coaching errors, I think he'll do that. I think it's good that he was like watching some of the other games, and maybe he can learn from Scott Frost of what not to do in late game scenarios or mid game scenarios. But over the past couple of years, in my opinion, I think WVU's had too many procedure penalties, too many undisciplined penalties, and if you're going to Pitt and losing a close game by 3 or 6, and you have a bunch of penalties, procedure penalties, that's not a good look.
One more thing, not saying I disagree with you. It's kind of just a different topic, but within this umbrella of what we're talking about of winning these types of games. And that's going back to the quarterback position of JT Daniels. And I want to talk about what Graham Harrell said today. He was asked about, does winning matter as a quarterback? And there's two sides to this coin, and I think these two sides are very distinct in that one side is your quarterback can only do so much. Like if you want to look at that Nebraska game, right? Nebraska, their final drive, they have the ball. Their quarterback puts the ball in the receiver's hands. He drops it. It turns into an interception. There's nothing the quarterback could have done there. But then again, like that's the quarterback's responsibility at the end of the day is for his receivers to catch. So there's two sides to that coin. I hate the argument that everything's the quarterback's fault because it's not. Because the quarterback can make a good throw, a receiver can drop the ball. Quarterback can make a good throw, a receiver can slip. Quarterback can make a good throw and something crazy happens or the receiver fumble. Like there's so many things that can happen after the quarterback does what they're supposed to do. The other side of that is the quarterback's your leader. The quarterback's your alpha. The quarterback's the guy that's supposed to be that dude. And until we have, we haven't seen a guy be that dude. You could even argue, if you really want to do it, you could argue Will Grier was not that dude. He did not win the big games when he had to. He didn't beat Oklahoma State on the road down the stretch. He didn't beat Oklahoma at home. Obviously, you can say different things led to both those losses, but Will Grier didn't win the games he had to win as the Mountaineers quarterback. You haven't really seen a guy win those games probably since Geno Smith. So this whole argument of having to be a winner, I think that JT Daniels has to go out there and win. You have to win these close games. JT Daniels is too talented, too experienced not to be able to win these games. And if you're West Virginia, you're waiting on that win. You're waiting to be able to beat a team by 3 points. You're waiting to do what every other team has done to you for the past decade. And now's your opportunity. Now you've got that quote unquote winner in a sense in JT Daniels. And I'm just waiting to see if he can actually do that and win the big games for West Virginia.
Yeah, it's going to be a big point right there, and there's obviously two sides to that coin. And going back and looking at Will Grier, sometimes watching those games, I was like, Will Grier is that dude. But you're right, the big games down the stretch at Oklahoma State up 17.5. Had to lead multiple times at home against Oklahoma, couldn't get those wins. But there's always two sides to the coin. The defense that year couldn't stop a parked car. I think that the play calling by Spavital was bad in that Oklahoma State game, but still. If you're the quarterback, if you're that talented, like a Will Grier, like a JT Daniels, Keaton Sweat, somebody like that, you got to step up and win games. And I think that's going to be a big point for JT Daniels this year. And here's what I think: I don't think the expectation is to go make the playoffs for WVU. No matter how good we might think this team is, I don't think that's the expectation.
Oh, for sure. I don't think the talent's there to even do it. I think the ceiling for this team is third place in the Big 12. Maybe second place and you sneak into the Big 12 title game.
Yeah, I'm not saying that their expectations are that high, but the 6-win seasons have to stop. And when you got a guy like JT Daniels, who's a proven winner, a proven accurate passer, a proven good at throwing the deep ball, and you got Graham Harrell calling plays, I think this team has to be different than the last two teams, the last 3 teams. And you got to give me 8 wins or something like that. Because going 6-6 and losing games, you should have beat Texas Tech on the road in 20, but nobody made a play. You should have beat so and so last year, but nobody stepped up and made a play.
Last year, you can go down the line. You got Texas Tech. You can just go down the line of games where you do 1 or 2 things right, or you have a winner at quarterback who steps up and makes that play. You win the game.
Texas Tech, Oklahoma on the road. There's so many games over the last 2-3 years where it's like if somebody just stepped up and made a big time play, maybe the Mountaineers win that. And you got JT Daniels this year, and I'm not saying everything's on him, but there's got to be a game, 2, maybe 3 games that if it comes down to the wire, he's got to be the guy that steps up and makes the play because it's not Jared Dagey anymore. It's not Jack Allison. It's not Austin Kendall anymore. It's a former 5-star.
The talent level at quarterback, I think West Virginia fans are still underestimating. I think going from a guy like Jared Dagey, and I wish Dagey the best, and I all due
Yes.
respect to him. He worked his tail off. He never complained, and he got a lot of crap from a lot of people on the outside. But when you just talent level, like the step up from Dagey to Daniels, it should be night and day. And I just think that is so much more important than what you think. And hearing how smart, how calm JT is. And when you go into an atmosphere like this, I just think that's so old. Like it's just so important for the Mountaineers. And I'm interested to see how it turns out.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy that's got a track record of winning. You know, he won at a huge high school at Maitre D. He was all over Sports Illustrated, ESPN, 5-star, went to USC, succeeded before the injury. Never lost a game at Georgia. I mean, and like you said, he was going up against the 1s and 2s of Georgia's defense every day in practice. He put up good numbers there before kind of getting, beat out or whatever you want to call it. And he's a very good quarterback that, like you said, the talent level, it shouldn't just be, maybe a couple plays here or there. You're like, oh, I think that ball was better than what we had last year. Now, like it's got to be night and day difference. And with an experienced offensive line and, receiving core, I think he's got limited excuses. So he's just got to stay healthy. And I trust that there's not going to be excuses there, and he's going to make the throws necessary to win ball games.
Let's pick a winner then. Let's go through first. We're going to go through 3 games outside of this West Virginia Pitt game this weekend. We'll do this every week and kind of keep track. A little fun game Aaron and I will play to see who's the better picker, a la college game day style. Notre Dame, Ohio State in the Horseshoe at night. Marcus Freeman, new coach for Notre Dame. I'm going to pick the Buckeyes, though. I just think CJ Stroud, he's going to be I think he wins the Heisman this year. I really do. I think Will Anderson's got a shot from Alabama, but I just think CJ Stroud's so good. Ohio State, that place is going to be electric. I'm going to take the Buckeyes there.
Yeah, me too on that. I can't stand Notre Dame, and I watched a good bit of CJ Stroud last year. He's a great passer. He's a great quarterback. I think he'll have a future in the NFL. Kind of had that one little game against Michigan, but that game, I think all of the Ohio State core had the flu up until that game. It was snowing, so I think that was an off game. I think he's going to go off against Notre Dame.
Georgia, Oregon. Georgia coming off national championship. Oregon takes Georgia's defensive coordinator, stumbling over my words here, as their new head coach. I think this game means a lot to Oregon. Obviously, rest in peace, Spencer Webb, Oregon Duck, who passed away recently. I think they're going to be playing for him. I think they're going to be playing for their head coach. This game is in Atlanta. A lot of pressure on the Dogs. Kind of don't want to get down. And everything tells me to pick Georgia, but I think I don't know. I just got a feeling. Oregon went into the Horseshoe last year and won a game against Ohio State, and I'm going to say they do it this year in week 1 against Georgia. They're going to beat Georgia. I'm taking the Ducks.
I'm going to go Georgia. Not a whole lot of strategy here. They're the defending champs for a reason. I really like the play calling of Kirby Smart. He showed me a lot over these last couple of years. Beating Saban every now and then, and finally getting over that hump and winning a championship. And I think Stetson Bennett will be. I think he'll have a fair game. I don't think he'll go out there and tear up the Ducks, but I think it'll be a close one. I think the Oregon might have a lead or two in the first half, but I'll go Georgia.
Last one before we pick our game of Thursday night. Cincinnati, Arkansas in Fayetteville. Cincinnati college football playoff last year. Arkansas had a pretty good year too, but I'm going to take the Razorbacks at home. Cincinnati, too much transition on the road against an SEC school. I just don't think they get it done. I'm going to take Arkansas.
So my pick was going to be Cincinnati because I like Luke Fickle, but it's in Fayetteville, SEC atmosphere. Arkansas is coming off a good season. They haven't been good in a while.
And they have some somewhat high expectations, I think, in that
Yeah.
SEC.
Yeah, I mean they had a good season last year. They won 8 or 9 ball games last year with a tough schedule. No Desmond Ritter anymore for Cincinnati. I'm not sure who their quarterback is. I'm not a Bearcat insider, but I know he has moved on to the Falcons now. So I'm going to go Arkansas against a young quarterback for Cincinnati.
Now the pick you have all been waiting for. Backyard brawl prediction. Aaron, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
All
So
right.
in our season preview, I picked Virginia Tech to beat the Mountaineers, and I picked WVU to go to Pittsburgh and win and split the rivalry 1-1. Maybe not in the way that most Mountaineer fans would predict it. I'm gonna go WVU 24-21. I think Casey Legg makes one kick. I'm not gonna say how long it is, but I think WVU is going to get really strong play from JT Daniels. I think it's going to be a lot like that Virginia Tech game in 2017, where you get a new transfers, former 5-star quarterback, kind of like Will Greer, and you kind of have to learn some things. But instead of learning things, and I think there was a lot of missed opportunities in that Virginia Tech game. I think JT Daniels is going to step up and and hit on some of those plays. I think the Mountaineers are going to get a big pick. I think I'm going to go Rashad Ajayi, the Colorado State transfer. I'm going to give him a pick, and I'm going to say WVU wins.
I'll go to players of the game that I think are going to make a big impact for the Mountaineers first. I think you look at a guy. I think Bryce Ford is going to have a big day. I just
Mm-hmm.
think him and JT Daniels, like I just think there's a connection there, and I think that's going to work. But in the end, I think this Pitt defensive line they're going to get after the Mountaineers, and I think that Pitt's offensive line is going to be able to stop the Mountaineer pass rush and kind of help Pitt attack a weaker Mountaineer secondary, a secondary that's still kind of meshing, still kind of gelling. Could I see the Mountaineers winning this game? Yeah. But I think Pitt at the end of the day is going to come out with the victory. I've also picked this for a couple other places, and I got to stay consistent, stay true to my pick. I'm going to pick the Panthers winning 27-20. I think it'll be a really fun game, and I just think Panthers get it done late.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that that's probably a more likely outcome there. It's when picking this game, I picked it for the preview, so I had to go back and think like, do I really believe in this pick that I'm picking? But I'm gonna stick with it. Maybe a little bit of optimism from me as a kind of Mountaineer follower since I was born. I'm sometimes a little glass half empty. I'm gonna go glass half full here. Maybe call it an upset.
See, I'm usually glass half full. I'm usually trying to find all the good things, but I'm just cautiously, like super cautious about this game. I just think there's a lot of variables on both sides, on Pitt and for West Virginia. So I'm gonna just kind of stay true to the line, stay true to everything there. Next up is going to be my interview with Dalton Coppola from Pitt. He covers the football team for Pitt Student Newspaper. He gave us some good insight on this Pitt team. It was stick around. It was a pretty good interview. As for myself, we will be coming back to you Friday. Win or lose, we'll get you something. Either record late Thursday night, or hopefully Friday morning before the Labor Day holiday weekend. And then we'll get you something next week as well, as the Mountaineers open their home schedule in a Big 12 capacity against Kansas. But obviously, a lot of things will happen before then. Final reminders, this week's game is on ESPN. It is at 7 p.m. Acrisure Stadium, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Backyard Brawl couldn't be a more fun way to open the 2022 football season. And oh, by the way, happy 60th birthday to my mother on Thursday. She'd be mad if I didn't give her that shout out. So for myself, I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Aaron Parker. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. Please stick around for the Dalton Coppola interview. And this is the Blue Gold Sports Podcast. What's up, everybody? It's my pleasure to be joined by Dalton Coppola of the Pitt News, the sports editor there. He's going to kind of help us preview Pitt in the Backyard Brawl this week. So, Dalton, just starting here, just kind of the sense of the backyard brawl from a Pitt perspective. How are things there? Kind of the hype surrounding things up where the game's actually going to be played.
I think it's a for the first time in a long time, there's a lot of energy surrounding, especially opening week. Last year it was UMass we played, and it was just there was nobody in the student section by the end of the second quarter. But this year, I mean, they sold out the student section. They sold out of season tickets like a couple weeks ago. So it's going to be a sold out stadium, and I think that's for the first time in a long time. There's going to be a really good atmosphere at Acrisure Stadium to welcome back the Mountaineers.
You talk about that atmosphere. Do you think that um, Pitt's success last season, obviously winning the ACC, and now a rivalry that hasn't been played since 2011, how much do you think kind of both of those factors are combining into this kind of hype machine that's building?
I think both of them are incredibly important. I mean, if Pitt didn't have any hype around them and West Virginia was coming in and there was no real like consequences for the game, it wouldn't be as exciting. But I think there's a lot of people this year that think Pitt could go. I mean, there's a lot of people that think Pitt's ceiling is the college football playoff. Whether you think that's going to happen or not, I'm not sure. But if you know, first 2 weeks of the season, you got West Virginia and Tennessee, and I think fans realize how important that game is. Both of those games are in order to chase that ceiling of going to the college football playoff. And then bringing back West Virginia, I mean, it's so close. So many people here, their parents went to Pitt or their parents went to West Virginia. Your next door neighbor went to West Virginia. It's just so close that there's so much build up for this game just to have bragging rights for this season. So I think both of those things are playing a huge part in the reason that this game is getting so hyped up.
Kind of looking now on the field, obviously, from a West Virginia perspective, the biggest threat, I think, to the Mountaineers is that defensive line of Pitts. They caused problems last year. They return most of them up front, and West Virginia's offensive line last year at times seemed to kind of crumble, especially under pressure, dealt with injuries. So, just do you think that's the place the Panthers will look to kind of take advantage of this West Virginia offense is up front? And is that kind of the new strength of this team this year, you think, for Pitt?
Oh, absolutely. I think that defensive line is really, really one of the best in the country. I mean, you're bringing back Kalijah Kancey's one of the best defensive tackles on the inside in the entire country. And then, I mean, Habakkuk Baldonado, I don't know how Pitt found him in Rome, but he's a force to be reckoned with. And then even you got Deslin Alexander and John Morgan on the outside too. It's just a really, really deep room. But I think another place you got to look out for is the linebackers. A lot of people have been talking about how Pitt lost a lot of linebackers, but these coaches are really, really high on Bengali Kamara. And I think he's a really athletic guy they're going to put outside of Servassier Dennis. And I think he's going to make a lot of plays, along with Shane Simon, transfer from Notre Dame. And I think our secondary, there's some more question marks there. So if the offensive line can give JT Daniels some time to throw, the Mountaineers could beat Pitt with our corners. I think there's a lot of question marks there still. Because Marquez Williams, he's good at times, but there's some times where you're wondering what happened when they get past him. So yeah, but I think that defensive line really is it's gonna be a tough test for the Mountaineers week one.
You speak of JT Daniels, and obviously the biggest storyline I think you could say is the whole quarterback battle with obviously then Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator for West Virginia, coming back into this game as well. So just talk about a little bit of Kedon Slovis and what you think and how he changes this offense. Obviously going from Kenny Pickett, who was in the Heisman race all last year and had found a lot of success, and then kind of given the reins to Slovis, who is kind of unproven in a sense in the last year or so.
Yeah, I think the thing with Keaton Slovis is I don't think anyone really knows what to expect. I think that's the biggest question mark. That's the biggest variable determining how far Pitt can go. I think obviously in his freshman year at USC, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. And then you saw him kind of taper off with injuries and just a little bit of a downgrade. He tapered off in play as well. But, I think you look at his accuracy. He's a really accurate quarterback, one of the highest completion percentages in Pac-12 history. I mean, I think he's going to have a solid year. I definitely don't think fans should expect him to be another Kenny Pickett. People think he's going to be a Heisman finalist. I don't think fans should expect that, simply because, Pitt also has change in offensive coordinator as well. Whipple, the guy, and he's at Nebraska now, but we have Signetti in now, and he's more of a grounded. He's got a lot of run packages in. He's got a lot of uses the tight ends a little bit more. So I think Keaton's going to be a big part of that offense too. But I think Pitt fans definitely need to come to the realization that he's not going to be Kenny Pickett, and they should be happy if he's 70% of what Kenny Pickett was. But I think he's going to have a good year.
Kind of also building off that, when you talk about who he's throwing the ball to, obviously losing Jordan Addison, huge loss. How do you kind of replace that? Obviously, there's probably not another just Jordan Addison there. Do you replace that by running the ball more, trying to kind of turn runs into play action? Do you think, the general sense of what they're going to try and do, or how do you try and fill that void?
I think they got a really good addition in Konate Mumfield from Akron, freshman All-American. I think he's a Jordan Addison type player. I don't think he's near the talent level of Jordan Addison, but I think he can kind of fill that role when it comes to running in the offense as a threat. They also have Jared Wayne on the outside, who was a really, really solid number 2 for Kenny Pickett last year. But I also think that, they're going to run the ball a lot more this year. Like, Signetti likes to get his tight ends and running backs involved, and I think that he's going to play into that. I think Israel Abanikanda is one of the better running backs in the ACC. And they also have Rodney Hammond, freshman last year, and he's coming back, and Sibo Flemster transferred from Notre Dame. So they've got a lot of backs who can get it done. And not to mention Gavin Bartholomew. I think he's one of the most versatile tight ends in the entire country coming into his sophomore season. So, I don't know how they're going to really replace Jordan Addison, but they've got a lot of weapons on offense. It's still a very deep, deep offense.
Have you kind of gotten a sense from Pitt coaches or around the building that there's a position group or an area on West Virginia that they are concerned about, that they think West Virginia holds a distinct advantage over them, or have you not really gotten that sense anywhere?
I haven't necessarily gotten the sense of a certain position group. I think the biggest thing they're trying to prepare their guys for is the atmosphere. I don't think they realize, because obviously most of these guys were like in middle school, high school when the last time these two teams played. I think that's the biggest thing they're trying to prepare for. Is it's going to be incredibly, incredibly rowdy in that stadium, and there's going to be a lot of West Virginia fans that make the trip up. I think that's what they have to be prepared for. I mean, fans, both sides throw bricks at the opposing buses. Like, not, I don't know if they're going to do that this year. I certainly hope not, but it has happened in the past. So I think that's what they're preparing for. Prepare for the worst with the rowdy fans. But not necessarily any position groups that they seem to be too worried about.
You talk about the atmosphere. Do you think that there's a little bit of, you could kind of, I think that both sides would think they might have an advantage. As for West Virginia, you played in a big rivalry game against Virginia Tech last year. West Virginia, you go into the Big 12, where you go to Austin, there's 105,000 people screaming at you. So obviously Pitt last year, they played in the ACC championship. So I feel like for both sides, there's definitely a give and take of, we've been in these kind of atmospheres before. But I think, as you said, though, there's nothing that I don't think you can compare to this.
No, I totally agree. I mean, Pitt played at Tennessee last year, but there's no history there with Tennessee. I mean, you go into Knoxville, but it's not like Tennessee's screaming about how much they hate Pitt, how much they want you guys to lose. I think this is a totally different ball game. It's just gonna be, it really is gonna be incredible to see.
As for just the atmosphere in general, Thursday night, bringing back the rivalry, national television, college game day, like, the stage is set in a sense. If you had to kind of give 3 things that you would think, if Pitt has to do 3 things to win the game, what would those 3 things be?
I think the first thing is win the battle in the trenches on both sides. I think they've got a really solid offensive line, and as we already talked about, the defensive line. Secondly, I think you got to run the ball well. That's something they struggled with last year. Finishing it on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. Those 3rd and shorts, you just got to be able to run the ball for 3-4 yards and pick up the first. I guess that would be my second thing. And the third thing, I guess, is stay level headed. Don't let the atmosphere get to you. Don't be throwing punches on the sidelines. Um, Stay away from personal fouls and silly avoidable penalties. I think those are really three keys to the game. Just play their game. Don't get too emotional.
And if you had to pick a winner or a score, what would you do if you're willing to do that?
Who and I think I do give the edge to Pitt just because of that defensive line. I really think it's going to be an issue for JT Daniels. I don't think he's going to have much time to throw. So I don't think you guys will have a chance to really pick on the secondary as much as you could if you had a little more time, but I think I'm going to give Pitt the edge. Not sure I have a specific score in mind, but
Fair enough.
stay tuned.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I do appreciate you joining us. For everyone listening, I'm joined by Dalton Coppola. Excuse me. Go give him a follow on Twitter at Dalton DALTON _ Coppola COPPOLA. And I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.